Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Here's the question today. What do I get out of this? Specifically, we've been talking about meekness. This is from Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. So the Beatitudes, in a sense, have been kind of brutal in one sort of a way. They've been requiring and demanding or observing that you get some good stuff if you're poor in spirit, if you mourn foremost over your sin and separation. And now, in verse 5, meekness. So it wants us to be meek in a dog-eat-dog world. But then it promises something, a kingdom of heaven, and comforting by God personally. And now you shall inherit the earth. Here's Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Shall inherit the earth. Well, what does that mean? What advantage is it to me? And maybe even let's talk about, what if I don't want this, or I say no to this? What are the consequences? Now remember, this verse is directly quoted from the Old Testament by Jesus. It's from Psalm 37, and the whole verse reads this: But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace. So it adds delight and peace. And the peace they're talking about is shalom. Now, shalom means more than just not being at fisticuffs with the world. It means contentment, harmony, wholeness, this sufficiency. It's a state of robust relational and physical health. So deliverance and salvation externally, but also this internal. So the question is would this be attractive to you to be in the state of delight and well-being and safety in a relationship with the Lord? Versus, would you like to be complete in Him, satisfied in Him, safe in Him, or receiving no inheritance, not being at peace, not enjoying contentment, being at physical and relational odds, and being basically characterized by discontentment, discord, division, and disinheritance? So this verse and the whole passage really are comparing two ways of life. And something is definitely required of you. So today, what's required of us is meekness. Now, remember what we've talked about, that meekness means to be bent a bit, bowed before Him, humble, and being Mr. Lowly Worm. However, it is positionally secure, as opposed to not having an inheritance and you've got to make it all your own. There's nothing here for you from anybody else. So do you hear what the passage says? That there is an inheritance. So what does an inheritance mean? It means that there are resources and riches that are sourced somehow from outside of you that are going to be given to your benefit. So this is not God's first day. There's treasures at your disposal while you're alive, and this inheritance, there's some of it for after your earthly demise. So for now, what you get is a peace that stands guard. So consider a moment the strength of the peace and what it must fight against. This person is described in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So it talks about a guarding of your hearts by the peace of God that stands against those bad boys: discontentment, discord, division, and disinheritance. So this is a big ask. Peace is fighting against all those things. So could the inheritance of this passage be big enough and strong enough and smart enough to stand guard against all the temptations of the wrong kingdom? So as we finish, do you have meekness? Do you know how to get a kingdom? An inheritance that you didn't earn? Do you know that you have a relational peace with God that couldn't happen without the help of somebody else, which turns out to be Jesus? So positionally, God is mad at sin and mad at sinners. He has to be. That's His job. He's holy. And then Jesus, like we walk into the building and God has this positional madness in His holiness, and Jesus says, wait, they're with me. I paid their cover charge. God says, yeah, great, perfect. So we get these benefits. And when do we get them? Now, we get some now, and we get some later. Here's the ones we get now. John 14:21. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. So here's what we get now. We get a relationship with God above our pay grade, above our earning, above our striving. Why? Just because he says so. And that certainly shuts our mouth of any boastfulness. So we get citizenships now in an invisible kingdom. We get the inheritance of peace, a peace dividend that's extended to me because of the super saving work of Jesus. And then later, 2 Peter 3:12 talks about this day of God, because of which the heavens will be set on fire and dissolved, and the heavenly bodies will melt away and burn. But according to his promise, we are waiting for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. So later, there's a new heaven and a new earth, and citizenship in somehow a new visible kingdom is going to be a place where righteousness dwells, and I get to dwell, and you get to dwell. So how do I get to inherit this kingdom of relational peace now? We talked about it yesterday. It's meekness was the key. What might meekness do in our relationships at home and at work and driving a car and with the government? What might meekness do in my relationship with God? It's that settled, submissive, secure, and spiritually solid and satisfied position. Being at relational peace with God now and later, it's where God bends down to the bent and leans down towards those who are leaned over, and God favors those who are fallen before him. God is biased toward the bowed, towards the meek. God lifts the lowly worms into an inheritance of peace. Thank you for listening.